CTV News at 5 with Hudson Mack.
An 18-year-old boy who was tossed from a vehicle during a deadly crash on the Malahat has now emerged from a medically induced coma. J.R. Corpuz was seriously injured when he was thrown from the back seat of an SUV that lost control on the Malahat, crossing the center line and slamming into an oncoming pickup truck. He is now reportedly fully aware and talking at Victoria General Hospital. Corpuz and a 6-year-old girl were the only survivors in the SUV. The little girl's mother was killed along with 2 teenage girls in the car. All of them were from Nanaimo. Now to Edmonton, where a woman who was out walking her dog this morning made a disturbing discovery, a cardboard box with a severed human head inside. It was found in an alley in Edmonton's northeast area. Investigators are trying to determine whether the head belongs to a body that was found in a ditch east of the city Saturday. Edmonton police have released few details. They won't speculate on who the victim or victims may be. The so-called Millennium Bomber, who was captured trying to get into the U.S. from Vancouver Island, has now been sentenced. Ahmed Rassam has been sentenced to 37 years in prison for plotting to blow up LAX, Los Angeles International Airport, New Year's Eve, 1999. He was arrested in December of that year in Port Angeles after he drove off the Coho ferry with his trunk full of explosives. The U.S. Justice Department had sought life in prison because of the mass murder he intended to inflict. He has already been sentenced twice, but both times they were overturned on appeal. Now he gets 37 years. Rassam had lived in Montreal for several years, coming to Canada as a refugee claimant. Victoria Police honoured staff from the Esquimalt Recreation Centre today for the role they played in catching a man suspected of inappropriately touching children. 9 people were presented with civic awards. You may remember in August, a parent contacted the rec centre saying there was a man touching children in the pool. The next day, with just a bare-bones description to go on, staff spotted a man they thought might be the suspect and called police.
We were made aware of what he looked like and who we thought he was, so we just kept our eye on him and pulled him out of the pool as soon as we saw the police arrive.
At that time, as you heard me describe earlier, it was a needle in the haystack. We had nothing solid to lead us to any suspect, which is always a bad case scenario for us. The following day, through the diligence of the staff, I know they had extra staff on to try and ensure the safety of the patrons here. They were able to identify the suspect and we were called.
The man was later charged with 3 counts of sexual interference with a person under the age of 16. Well, police officers up and down Vancouver Island will join law enforcement agencies across the country tomorrow supporting the Special Olympics. And you'll know they're doing it when you see them wearing red. It'll be on their feet, on their shoelaces. It's known as Be a Fan Day, and thousands of officers will be taking part, including Vic PD's acting chief, Del Mack. For more information about the Special Olympics and where you can get some of these red laces, visit specialolympics.bc.ca. Home prices in Greater Victoria edged down in September, and analysts are blaming the federal government for the dip. There's a new survey that shows home prices weakened in September when those new federal mortgage rules came into effect. Experts say those rules gave some new buyers cold feet and it made it more difficult for first-time buyers to get into the market. Nationally, prices were down in September as well, 0.4% lower than the previous month. In Victoria, the decline was more significant, a drop of 1.3% in the average house price. The federal government is also tightening up rules around prepaid credit cards. New regulations ban imposed expiry dates and force the issuers to be upfront about any fees and conditions. Businesses that do not comply could face a fine of up to $500,000. It was back to business as usual on board the Queen of New Westminster this morning. BC Ferries crews worked through the night to repair the damage that was done by a fire that knocked out the ship's forward bow thruster yesterday. The ferry was loaded up this morning for the 5:15 sailing from Tsawwassen to Duke Point. The vessel was temporarily taken out of service yesterday after fire broke out in the bow thruster compartment. It happened about 10 minutes into the sailing yesterday morning out of Tsawwassen. The ship came back to the terminal, unloaded its passengers, and the fire was quickly extinguished. It then went through some safety tests, trials, and inspections, and was cleared to set sail and go back in service this morning. Well, you might expect the streets of downtown Victoria to get a little quieter in the days ahead. Hundreds of tourists sailed away today, marking the end of this year's cruise ship season. The Holland America ship MS Zaandam left Ogden Point for San Diego this afternoon, taking 1,400 people on board with it. The last cruise ship of the season. This year, Ogden Point saw 229 ships pull in, bringing 475,000 passengers or more. The Greater Victoria Harbour Authority says that's a lot of people, but we could attract even more by installing a fourth berth and adding a marine shuttle.
I would say that with growth, there comes impacts to the community, and we're working with the community in managing the transportation on and off the site. And next year, where we're working in putting a marine shuttle dock in here at the Ogden Point, which will serve as a dock or a shuttle service from here to downtown, as well as open up for ShoreX operations for whale watching that can pick up their passengers right here. And that's part of our efforts and our commitment to managing our transportation impacts.
The Greater Victoria Harbour Authority says this cruise ship season was very successful. It's at work already on next year's cruise schedule. Hurricane Sandy pounding Jamaica with heavy rain, bringing a powerful storm surge as it makes landfall. The hurricane is on a path that would carry it across the island and then onto Cuba, and then it may pose a threat to Florida's east coast. One person was killed when Sandy hit Haiti. A woman swept away by a rushing river. If it doesn't make landfall in the U.S. as is expected, it will veer north and possibly in the west up the U.S. eastern seaboard. This year's National Poppy Campaign is now officially underway. Governor General David Johnston received the first poppy in Ottawa this morning. He was also handing out poppies to veterans on hand for the ceremony. The Poppy Campaign in British Columbia kicked off yesterday at Government House. A sixth person has now been fired following that scandal at the BC Ministry of Health. In September, questions arose about contracting and grant practices between ministry employees and researchers at UVic and UBC. Accusations included misconduct, privacy breaches, and conflict of interest. Initially, 4 people were fired. 3 were suspended without pay. Now a total of 6 people has been terminated, and 1 person remains under suspension. UBC and UVic contracts worth about $4 million were also suspended as the investigation continues. A 50-year-old man has been killed in the province's first deadly avalanche of this season. 2 people from a mining camp northwest of the community of Stewart near the Alaskan border were doing survey work when the avalanche came thundering down. The men were swept about 300 meters down a steep slope. One was able to dig his way out, the other could not. Last year's first avalanche death was not reported until the middle of November. Pipeline protesters descended on MLA offices up and down the island today as part of a province-wide demonstration to capitalize on the momentum from Monday and the rally at the BC legislature. Hundreds of demonstrators against the Northern Gateway pipeline rallied outside Liberal and NDP offices today in Victoria and in Nanaimo. Supporters made their message loud and clear. They don't want oil tankers along the BC coast. And in Nanaimo, MLAs were even taking part in the protest.
Our federal government particularly and our provincial government seem willing to sell us out just for a few more dollars for the oil sands.
Per se against oil, but this particular project is ludicrous. And if anything I can do to stop this, I'm here.
We're not going to stand by and just let something happen without showing that we believe in something.
Organizers say these demonstrations are just the start. They'll keep the pressure on politicians to stop any further pipeline development or tanker traffic. And they say there will be many more protests to come. Police and fire investigators say somebody deliberately torched a vehicle in the south end of the city this morning. Witnesses caught the explosive blaze on camera. When firefighters arrived, the car was fully engulfed. The Nanaimo Fire Department says it wasn't a typical car fire, the kind that's usually sparked by a mechanical problem. This, they say, is suspicious.
I was fairly far away, but nothing blew up. I heard some hissing and some really high pressure fizzing sound.
It's not that common. We don't get them, every day or every week kind of thing, but certainly once a month we'll get something similar to that, to this type of incident where the car is maybe stolen or broken into and things are stolen, the car's lit on fire to cover the evidence.
The Nanaimo RCMP say the car had been parked there for more than a week and the door was open when it was found. If you know anything about this, you're asked to contact the Nanaimo Mounties or Crime Stoppers. We'll get set to tie up your red shoelaces for tomorrow in support of the Special Olympics. Law enforcement officers up and down Vancouver Island are going to be doing it in support of Be a Fan Day. It's to show their strong ties to the Special Olympics and the Law Enforcement Torch Run, which helps raise money for Special Olympics Canada.
Well, the LHR had stopped for a number of years. Then we resurrected it a couple of years back. And since that time, we've made almost $6,000 towards the Special Olympics. And last year, we doubled the numbers who participated. We're hoping next year we'll double that again.
Over the last 2 years, RCMP and NANAIMO have helped to raise thousands of dollars for Special Olympics Canada.